She was just a struggling analyst fighting to save her mother. He was a ruthless billionaire betrayed by the woman he trusted most. When their worlds collided in a contract marriage meant to protect his empire, neither expected it to spark a war of corporate betrayal, secret experiments, and a love more powerful than anything they'd known. Who was Leona Hart? And how did she melt the heart of Damien Cross, the man known as the Steel Strategist? This is not just a story, it's a reckoning. Where are you watching from? Comment below and don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable African stories. The divorce papers lay flat on Damien Cross's glass desk, their edges catching the golden slant of late afternoon sun. For a man known as the Steel Strategist, cold, calculating, unbeatable in boardrooms, the act of staring at his ex-wife's signature felt like standing on the edge of a cliff and realizing the ground had already given way beneath him. At 36, he had built Crosswell Enterprises into a global force, a legacy carved from stone and sleepless nights. But none of that power could undo the betrayal etched in black ink by Vivian Rhodes. Not just infidelity. Treason. She had handed internal financial data to his most dangerous rival, Eli Morrison, while still wearing Damien's wedding ring. He leaned back in his chair, steel-gray eyes scanning the skyline beyond the penthouse windows. It was a city he had conquered, tower by tower, deal by deal. Yet tonight, all the shimmering glass felt fragile. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Sir," said Zane Porter, his legal advisor, stepping in with his usual briskness. "The board is waiting." Damien stood, adjusting the cuff of his Tom Ford suit. "Let them wait 5 more minutes." Zane nodded and left, his footsteps soft against the Italian marble floor. Damien's hand hovered over the manila envelope on his desk, the one not yet filed with the court. Inside were photographs, stolen moments captured by his private investigator, Vivian, in London, laughing over wine with Eli Morrison, her hand already bearing his engagement ring. Just 3 weeks ago, she'd kissed Damien goodbye via video call, claiming she was traveling for consulting. The real project was betrayal. The enemy hadn't just come from outside, he'd been sleeping next to her. His phone buzzed with a message from Cassidy, his younger sister. "Still at the office? Come home. You need sleep, you need air, you need to be human again." He didn't answer. Sleep had been a stranger since the day he found out. The walls of his office, where empires were forged and fortunes decided, now echoed with silence too loud to ignore. He poured 2 fingers of scotch, a 30-year-old bottle his father once gifted him with the words, "Never let them see you bleed." The liquor burned going down. He didn't flinch. Another knock. Zane again, this time with a folder of printed documents. The final settlement terms. "She's agreed to the NDA, waived rights to all Crosswell assets and shares." "Of course she did," Damien muttered. "She doesn't need them. Eli's got deeper pockets than I do, and fewer scruples." Zane hesitated. "There's one more concern. The board wants to discuss succession. The bylaws your father drafted, they're very clear." Damien turned slowly. "I need a wife and an heir, or I lose controlling interest." Zane gave a single nod. "They're worried, especially with Morrison circling again." Damien set his glass down with controlled force. "Then let's give them what they want. Draft a contract marriage, ironclad, clauses for infidelity, espionage, social media behavior, nothing gets through." Zane blinked. "Any particular candidate in mind? Someone smart, quiet, unaffiliated, no ex-clients of Morrison, no socialites." He paused. "Preferably with a background in finance or law. I'll have HR begin discreet screenings." "Do it quickly," Damien said, sliding the divorce envelope into his drawer. "They want to see blood. I'll give them a crown." As he walked toward the elevator that would take him to the boardroom, his reflection in the glass caught his eye. Impeccably dressed, jaw tight, eyes stormy, every bit the Steel Strategist they whispered about in shareholder meetings. But under the polished armor was a man who had believed once. In marriage, in love, in loyalty. He wouldn't make that mistake again. He would build his future the same way he'd built his empire, with strategy, not sentiment. And miles away, in a cramped downtown office, a woman named Leona Hart stared at an overdue hospital bill, unaware that her name was about to be written into the next great negotiation of Damien Cross's life, one that would change both their lives forever. Leona Hart squinted at the screen, the flicker of spreadsheet cells the only light in the otherwise darkened office. Sterling and Associates had long since emptied for the night, but she remained in her cubicle, back aching, mind racing. The Morrison Group report wasn't due until Friday, but she always worked ahead, because every early submission, every clean analysis, was one more reason to stay employed, one more drop in the bucket to cover her mother's experimental treatment. A new notification pinged. Hospital payment due, $8,100. She minimized it immediately, swallowing the dread. Her reflection in the screen stared back, tired but sharp. Her honey-brown hair was pulled into a no-nonsense bun, her sensible navy blazer draped just right to hide how threadbare the blouse beneath had become. The only luxuries she allowed herself were her glasses, thin gold frames that made her green eyes pop, a gift to herself from her first bonus. Pride flickered, then vanished under exhaustion. Still grinding, Wonder Girl? Leona turned to see Jasmine, the firm's immaculate office manager, leaning against her cubicle wall with a knowing smirk. Not a hair out of place, not a crease in sight. Just wrapping up, Leona replied, trying not to sound defensive. I'd hold off on Morrison Group if I were you. Word is, Drake Morrison's not after partnerships anymore. He's got his eye on Crosswell. Leona's fingers froze over the keyboard. Crosswell? She echoed, masking the sudden flutter of interest. She'd been quietly tracking Crosswell Industries' stock behavior for months, suspecting internal volatility. And Damian Cross's recent divorce, though wrapped in silence, had sent ripples through the financial sector. Speaking of, Jasmine added, lowering her voice conspiratorially, HR's gotten some unusual calls about you. Leona blinked. Me? Zane Porter himself requested your background check. That's Crosswell's head of legal, big leagues. Leona barely registered Jasmine's exit. Why would someone like Zane Porter be interested in her? She was junior staff, albeit fast rising. No connections, no scandals, just numbers and spreadsheets. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number lighting the screen. Normally she wouldn't answer, but instinct whispered otherwise. This is Leona Hart. Miss Hart, came a smooth, measured voice. Zane Porter from Crosswell Industries. Apologies for the late hour, but we have an urgent matter to discuss. Would you be available for a private meeting tomorrow morning? Her heart skipped. May I ask what this pertains to? I'm afraid we can only discuss the nature of the opportunity in person, he replied. A car will pick you up at 8:30. Meeting is at 9 sharp. As the call ended, Leona sat frozen. She wasn't sure how long she stared at her screen before realizing her hand was trembling. Something was happening, something big. The next morning, dressed in her best gray suit and low heels, Leona sat in the back of a sleek black Mercedes, watching the city change from faded brick to gleaming steel. The Crosswell Tower rose like a blade into the sky, its mirrored surface catching the sunrise in fractured light. Security waved her through as if they'd known her for years. Her reflection in the elevator, mirrored panels showed a woman trying hard to look composed. Beneath the surface, her pulse roared. Zane met her at the executive floor, guiding her through a private corridor into a spacious conference room. But it wasn't the view of the skyline that took her breath away. It was the man standing at the head of the table. Damian Cross. He was taller than she expected, his suit tailored so sharply it seemed carved from shadow. Power radiated off him in quiet waves, but it was his eyes, storm gray, piercing, that held her still. Miss Hart, he said, voice deep with a rasp of fatigue. Please, sit. She obeyed, pulse pounding. Your analysis of Morrison's shell acquisitions was exceptional, he began without preamble. It caught our attention, particularly the part about using personal leverage in hostile takeovers. Leona blinked. That report was internal, not yet submitted. We have our ways, Damian said smoothly. More importantly, it shows us something we need. He paused. His next words came with a weight she didn't yet understand. What do you know about contract marriages? For a moment, she thought she'd misheard. I'm sorry. What? Zane slid a document across the table. A legal agreement. 2-year term. Specific clauses. Significant compensation. Leona opened the folder. The figures on the first page alone were staggering. Her mother's treatment could be fully covered, twice over. Why me? She managed. Damian met her eyes with brutal honesty. Because you're brilliant but unknown. Because you don't come from our circles. And because you have a need we can solve while you help us solve ours. The morning light painted the room gold, but Leona's world shifted into grayscale. She wasn't just staring at a contract. She was staring at a door she could walk through and never come back the same. The wedding had taken exactly 28 minutes. No flowers, no guests, no vows beyond the legal minimum. Just Damien, Leona, Zane, 2 witnesses, and the city's most discreet officiant. It was efficient, unromantic, exactly what the contract had outlined. Yet as Damien slid the ring onto her finger, one custom designed to match her quiet style, Leona felt something unexpected flicker beneath her ribs. Not nerves, not fear. Something she wasn't ready to name. By noon, a press release had gone live. Crosswell CEO Damien Cross marries rising financial star Leona Hart in a strategic alliance to ensure long-term company stability. The photo they'd used, him in a charcoal suit, her in a sleek gray dress, looked perfect. Corporate, powerful, detached. But Leona remembered the way Damien's hand had lingered a second longer than necessary on her back as they exited the ceremony. A pause, a breath, a whisper of something more. By evening, she stood in the master suite of his penthouse, staring at the city lights through floor-to-ceiling glass. Her wedding gown, a minimalist Vera Wang chosen by PR, hung over a chair. She'd changed into something less formal, a silk slip that clung in places she wasn't used to noticing. Marina, the housekeeper, had offered a kind smile before retreating with a soft, "Mr. Cross will be up shortly." Even the wedding night was on schedule. Leona paced, trying to focus. She wasn't here for romance. She was here for her mother, for financial security, for the 2-year plan that ended with her walking away clean and whole. But nothing in the contract had prepared her for the tension in her chest as she heard the door open behind her. Damien entered silently, suit jacket off, tie loose, sleeves rolled to his forearms. He looked less like a CEO and more like the man she'd seen through brief cracks in his armor. Tired, wary, unguarded. His eyes found her instantly. "The press is pleased," he said, voice low. "The stock jumped 5 points. Morrison's shell companies halted activity by 3 p.m. Leona managed a nod, grateful for the familiar terrain of numbers. "That's good. Stability is working." He crossed to the wet bar and poured 2 glasses of champagne, handing one to her. Their fingers brushed. A shiver ran through her before she could hide it. "We should talk about expectations," he said. Leona stiffened slightly, then nodded. "Of course. The contract states the need for an heir within 2 years," he continued, "but it doesn't dictate tonight." She blinked, caught off guard. "You're not expecting—" "No," Damien interrupted softly. "I want to understand why you're trembling." She looked away. This would be my first." The confession hung between them like a held breath. His silence wasn't awkward, it was heavy, reverent. "You should have told me," he said at last. "It wasn't relevant to the contract," she whispered, her voice nearly cracking. "And I didn't want you to think I was unqualified." A sound escaped him, a laugh tinged with disbelief and something else. He moved closer, lifting a hand to her cheek. The touch was unexpectedly gentle, his thumb brushing the corner of her mouth. "You're not a requirement, Leona. You're a person. And tonight isn't about contracts or performance metrics. It's about choice." Her breath hitched, but she didn't move away. "So what happens now?" He searched her eyes for a long moment. "Now, we sleep. Tomorrow, we start learning who we really married." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He stepped back and turned toward the dresser, grabbing sleepwear from a drawer like it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe, in some alternate life, it could have been. Later, as they lay on separate sides of the bed, Leona surprised herself by speaking. "My mother's treatment, will the contract truly cover it all?" Damien's voice was steady in the dark. "Every cent, and more, if needed." "Why? Because no one should have to sell themselves to save someone they love," he said quietly. Silence stretched, soft and warm. "Tell me about her," he added. And so she did. Her mother's laugh, her stubborn strength, the chemo that didn't work, the experimental treatments that might. Damien listened without interruption, just the steady rhythm of his breath beside her, the occasional question that proved he heard every word. When her voice faltered, his hand found hers beneath the covers. Not possessive, just present. "You'll never be alone in this," he said. And for the first time in years, she believed it. The storm rolled in just past midnight, rain lashing against the penthouse windows like nature itself was protesting the calm that had settled over their carefully constructed arrangement. Leona sat cross-legged on the edge of the oversized bed, hair still damp from her shower, eyes scanning a wall of monitors on her laptop. The data wasn't adding up. Morrison's acquisitions weren't random. She traced transaction after transaction, her fingers moving with the speed of certainty, until the pattern emerged. They weren't just targeting Crosswell shares anymore. They were moving laterally, buying out Crosswell's medical research partners, quietly shifting power beneath the surface. And all of them shared one disturbing link: a research specialty in fertility optimization. Leona's throat tightened. She tapped a folder open. Project Xenith. Footsteps approached. Damien's voice, low and rough from lack of sleep, broke the silence. "You found something." She turned to see him shirtless, dressed only in dark pajama pants, a towel slung around his neck. His presence was magnetic even in exhaustion. His eyes flicked to the screen, then back to her face. "I think Morrison's after more than your company," she said. "He's targeting the infrastructure that supports Crosswell's biotech wing. All of these acquisitions connect to fertility programs, experimental, unregulated." Damien moved to stand behind her, his hands braced on the desk, leaning close. "What kind of experiments?" "Implantation protocols, enhanced ovulation, selective genetic coding for multiple births." He stilled. "Say that again." "They're developing compounds to increase the chances of twins or triplets, genetic manipulation disguised as treatment." Damien pushed off the desk like he'd been burned. "Vivian," he said, voice tight. "What?" "She brought me a proposal a year ago. Said it was cutting-edge fertility science, wanted me to greenlight a pilot program through our research division. I refused. Too many ethical red flags." Leona's fingers flew over the keyboard. "They didn't stop when you declined. They used Morrison's shell companies instead." Her stomach turned as the implications settled. "Damien, there's more." She turned the laptop toward him. Her voice was thin, unsure. "The labs they're using, one of them has my name in the donor database. But I've never given any medical data to Crosswell or Morrison." His brow furrowed. "You're sure?" She nodded. "I used a fertility app once, years ago, for health tracking. If they bought that data, if they used it..." Damien's jaw clenched. "You think they targeted you specifically?" "I think this whole marriage might not have been coincidence." A silence fell between them, heavy and dangerous. "I need to know," she said suddenly. "There's a chance I'm pregnant." Damien stared at her, his entire body going still. "Leona? I haven't told you because I wasn't sure, but I took a test this morning. Positive." He crossed to her in 2 steps. "You should have told me the second you knew." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know how. I don't even know if this was us or them." Damien knelt before her, his hands gentle as they found hers. "Don't you dare let them take this from us." Tears she hadn't let fall in years slid free. "If they engineered it, they didn't engineer you." He interrupted. "Or your heart. Or this moment." A sharp knock at the penthouse door made them both jump. Damien moved like a panther, grabbing the phone with one hand and the security tablet with the other. Zane's face appeared on screen. "We've got a breach." One of the lab directors leaked internal emails. "We were right. Morrison and Vivian planned the entire sequence, including using Leona's biometric data to expedite the ideal match algorithm." Leona sank onto the bed. This wasn't just a business arrangement, it was a controlled experiment. Damien turned back to her, eyes dark. "Not anymore." He crossed the room and opened a locked drawer in his desk, pulling out a folder marked Emergency Protocol, Gene Exposure. He pressed a thumbprint, activated a secure call line. "They used our marriage, our lives, our future." She met his gaze. "Then let's burn down every lab they built it on." And somewhere across the city, Morrison received an alert. A new variable had emerged in his perfectly calculated equation. Love. The one force science could never replicate, and the only one powerful enough to bring his empire to its knees. The hospital room was quiet save for the soft beeping of the fetal monitors and the occasional hush of nurses moving through the hall outside. Leona lay propped up against a mound of pillows, her fingers laced tightly with Damien's. Rain tapped gently on the window, not like the chaos of the night they uncovered Morrison's plan, but like something cleansing, something waiting for rebirth. Her labor had started 3 weeks early. Twins didn't always wait for convenience. Damien sat at her side, his dark suit replaced with hospital scrubs, The sleeves of his shirt rolled back to his elbows as if he were ready to fight off the world. His grip never loosened, not once, through hours of contractions, through pain that made Leona gasp and sweat and grit her teeth against curses. But he didn't flinch. He whispered to her. Stories, promises, names they'd chosen. He said them over and over like prayers. Alec, she whispered as another contraction built, and Julian. Damien smiled, though it was tight, strained. Alec and Julian, he agreed, strong, like their mom. She let out a breath that trembled. Are you scared? He leaned down, kissed the back of her hand, terrified. The door swung open and Dr. Renner stepped in, flanked by 2 nurses. It's time, he said gently. Leona nodded, too exhausted to speak. Damien helped her sit up straighter, brushed a kiss to her temple. You've got this, he murmured, his voice ragged. I'm right here. The next 30 minutes passed in a haze of bright lights, strained breathing, and the clenched intensity of focused pain. But through it all, Damien never let go of her. When Alec let out his first sharp cry, the sound cracked through Leona's chest like sunlight. When Julian followed 4 minutes later, softer but just as strong, she couldn't hold back the tears. They're perfect, the nurse whispered, placing the tiny bundles into her arms one at a time. Leona looked down, heart swelling, breath catching. 2 boys. Dark hair like Damien. One had her nose, the other her chin. Both had her whole heart already. She turned to Damien and found him staring at them like they were miracles. And maybe they were. They're real, she whispered. He nodded slowly, eyes shimmering. So are we. Later, after the medical staff had left them alone and the boys were sleeping in their clear bassinets beside the bed, Damien pulled out a small velvet box from the pocket of his jacket. Leona's brows lifted. We already signed the contract, she said, teasing gently, her voice hoarse. This one isn't business, Damien replied. He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring, nothing flashy, just stunning in its sincerity. I want to marry you again, Leona. No clauses, no timelines, just us. Just love. Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time they were soft, full of peace instead of fear. She nodded, unable to speak, and held out her hand. He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her palm, reverent. In that quiet space, surrounded by monitors and new life and rain on the glass, Leona realized what they had built, beyond the contracts, beyond the manipulation, beyond the betrayals of their past. A family. Not engineered, not calculated, chosen. Damien moved to the bassinets, scooping Julian into his arms with practiced gentleness. He came back to the bed, settling beside Leona as she held Alec. The boys slept between them now, tiny fingers curling into fists, dreams flickering behind closed eyes. They'll try again, Leona said after a long silence, her voice barely audible. Yes, Damien replied, but they won't succeed. She looked at him, his jaw tense, his eyes fixed on the life he now guarded more fiercely than any fortune. Because we'll stop them? He met her gaze. Because they don't understand what we've built. They never will. They only know how to manipulate. They don't know how to love. She rested her head against his shoulder, eyes drifting shut. We'll teach them. Even if it's by surviving. By thriving, Damien corrected, kissing her hair. As dawn broke over the city, the storm finally faded, and in the soft light of morning, with their sons safe, their hands joined, and a new ring glinting on her finger, Leona knew the truth. Their love wasn't born of contracts, it was born of fire. And it had survived. Life lesson from the story. Sometimes the most unexpected arrangements lead to the most profound transformations. Damien and Leona entered their marriage as strangers, bound by necessity and guarded by clauses, but what they discovered was a love built not on illusion or perfect circumstances, but on resilience, trust, and shared purpose. Their story teaches us that love doesn't always arrive wrapped in romance or declared in grand gestures. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through late-night conversations, through battles fought side by side, through the smallest acts of care when the world feels like it's falling apart. More importantly, their journey reveals that no amount of manipulation, no matter how calculated, can replicate what is born from genuine connection. Love, when chosen freely and protected fiercely, becomes the greatest force of all. It protects, it heals, and it builds, far beyond what any contract or blueprint can contain. In a world that often reduces relationships to transactions and success to numbers, this story is a reminder. The heart, once opened, can lead to something infinitely more powerful than power itself. Love isn't weakness, it's strength. It's the legacy we leave behind, not in wealth or empire, but in the people we choose to stand beside. Where are you watching from? We'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if this touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow our channel for more powerful African stories and emotional journeys that stay with you long after the final word.